Hi everybody, I hope you're keeping well. I'm just going to put a few short videos together and we'll try and select some topics. So this topic, a couple of people have asked for a bit of help with manufacturing accounts. So one of the main things to remember with manufacturing accounts is that some costs are direct, and I think we have had a few lessons on that. Some costs are direct and we can trace them back to the product, and other costs are indirect and we can often call those overheads. So that's one thing to remember, and another thing to remember is in manufacturing, instead of buying in goods and then selling them on, you often had a purchases account and a sales account when you did your bookkeeping. With manufacturing, instead of buying the goods in and selling them on, we're going to actually produce the goods ourselves in the factory. So we have to firstly think that in the factory there are three different types of stock. You will have stock of raw materials. So, all of your components, okay? The raw materials that go into making the product. And these would be your direct materials. We also have what we call work in progress. At any time in the factory, there will be stocks of raw materials and there will be stocks of goods which are halfway or part way through the manufacturing process. And finally, when the goods come off the conveyor belt or off the production line, we should have our finished goods. So we have three different types of stock: work in progress, finished goods and raw materials. Now in the factory, obviously we're going to have to start with the raw materials, because we start with raw materials, we get part way through the process and then we get to the end of the production process. So with a manufacturing account, we're going to be firstly dealing with all our direct costs, the ones that can be traced back to the product, and these are going to start with raw materials. Now, if my year runs from January to December, at the end of December, I will do a stock take and I will physically count how much stock I have. Okay, I will count up how much raw material stock I have, I will count up how much work in progress stocks that I have, and I'll also count up how many finished goods I have at the end of December, 31st of December 1999, and then that will be the same day, the same amount of stocks will be on the 1st of January 2000. Now, just because they're last year's stock, we don't just get rid of them. In fact, those are the materials that should get used up first when we go to make our product. So the layout of the manufacturing account is going to start with the opening stock of raw materials. If I just write that out, try and keep it neat. Okay, just because they're from last year, we don't get rid of them. Okay, we use them up first. Now, I don't really think that they're going to last that long. They're the stocks that we had left over from last year. So we're going to use them up first, and then we will need to actually buy some more raw materials. So the next thing that we have, our direct costs that we're dealing with, is purchase of raw materials. Okay. So I use up what I had, and I have to buy some more raw materials. Now, at the end of year 2000, we'll do exactly the same thing again. And at the end of December, we will count up the stock of raw materials that is still left. And we will call that our closing stock at the end of the year. And just as last year's closing stock became this year's opening stock, this year's closing stock will become next year's opening stock. So, if we're working out the cost of the raw materials, it will be what we used from last year plus what we bought minus what we have still got left, minus our closing stock of raw materials. Minus the closing stock of raw materials. That actually should give us what we've used. What we had from last year, plus what we bought, minus what we've still got. If we've still got it, we haven't used it up. So, opening stock of raw materials, add the purchase of raw materials, minus or take away the closing stock of raw materials, will actually give us the cost of the raw materials that we've actually used. Okay, that should give us the cost of raw materials consumed. Opening stock of raw materials, add purchases of raw materials, take away the closing stock of raw materials that you've still got in the factory, you've still got them there. That should give you then the actual raw materials that you've used. What you had plus what you bought minus what you've still got left is the cost of the raw materials actually used, or they may say cost of raw materials consumed. Doesn't matter. Cost of raw materials used or cost of raw materials consumed. Therefore, we have at this point dealt with the first type of stock, the stock of raw material. And this is all direct because, this is a direct cost because it is actually related back to the product. If you think about it, we're still in the factory. And if we want to make a product, yes, we definitely have to have this raw materials, but we also need the person on the production line to actually make the product. And that is the direct labour, the constructor, the producer, the assembler. So, if we want to work out the cost of manufacturing a product, we need the cost of the raw materials that went into that product, but we also need the cost of the person who is making that product, the direct labour. So on top of the direct raw materials, I'm now going to add in the direct labour plus direct labour. So at the moment, the product is costing the direct materials that I'm using, and also the direct labour of the person who's putting that product together. We also had, we did mention that there are also things called direct expenses. These don't come up very often in the exam, but if we had a direct expense, such as, a royalty per chair. For instance, I might want to manufacture a chair. I like the design, so I go to the designer and I say, please may I use your design to manufacture a chair? And they say yes, but because it's my design and you're using it, you need to give me £1 for every chair that you make. So in order to make the chair, I have to have the direct materials, I have to have the direct labour of the person producing it, and I may have a direct expense because each chair is costing me £1 of royalty, and I can easily chase that back to the product. So I'm now going to add in any direct expenses. At the moment then, we said that costs are broken down into material costs, into labour costs and into expenses. Those are some of the earlier lessons that we've done. Here you can see that we've taken the direct materials, the direct labour and the direct expenses involved in the manufacturing. These three direct costs, the cost of the raw materials, the cost of the direct labour and the cost of the direct expense, are all going to be added together to get the first section of the manufacturing account. These three direct costs added together, the direct materials, the direct labour and the direct expenses, all added together equal your direct cost or prime cost. If you think about Prime Minister, he's the first minister. If you think about prime costs, these are our first costs of production. So we add together the three direct costs. Your exam may refer to it as direct cost, or it may refer to it as prime cost, the first costs of production. So this first section is the first part of a manufacturing account. It deals with actually being in the factory and trying to produce. And in trying to produce, we need the raw materials. How much raw materials do we use? What we had, plus what we bought, minus what we've still got left. We also need the direct labour to put the product together and any direct expenses that relate to that product. Okay? Therefore, the prime cost of production, the direct cost of production, is solely concerned with the direct cost of the manufacturing. However, we're still in the factory, and in order to make these goods, whatever they are, chairs, tables, it doesn't really matter, we need the materials, we need the labour, we have to pay the expense if it's there, but we can't make anything without heat and light, without power, without factory insurance, without factory maintenance, without factory cleaning, without warehousing, without depreciation on the factory machines. So as well as being direct costs in the factory, there are also many manufacturing overheads or manufacturing indirect costs. And if we want to get a proper total cost of production, it can't just be direct, because we have to pay factory heating, factory lighting, factory repairs, factory maintenance, factory insurance, factory canteen wages, so many costs in the factory. So what we have to do next is, if we want to actually work out a proper manufacturing cost, we need to add in also these indirect or overhead production costs. So on top of this prime or direct costs, we're going to add in our manufacturing or production, whichever they want to call it, manufacturing or production overheads. I'll try and write as quickly as I can. Okay, so you add in your manufacturing overheads, and they will then call this, they change it from year to year, but when you've got your direct cost of manufacturing and your indirect cost of manufacturing, the heat of the factory, the lighting of the factory, the insurance of the factory, the cleaning of the factory, the maintenance of the factory supervisor, when you've got all of those indirect costs added on as well, we get to the manufacturing cost. So this is the first section of the manufacturing account. Opening stock of raw materials, add purchase of raw materials, less closing stock of raw materials should give you the direct materials that you actually use. On top of your direct materials, you need your direct labour, the person who has to produce the good. And you also need any direct expenses that might relate to that product. All of these direct costs added together will give us the prime cost of production, or the direct cost of production. We also know that there are many other costs associated with production. We're still in the factory, and we need to heat the factory, we need to light the factory, we need to insure it, we need to maintain it, we need to clean it. So there are a lot of production overheads that also need to be added on. And now we have the direct plus the indirect cost added together to give us the total manufacturing cost. If we just go back to the very beginning, we said that we needed to deal with raw materials and work in progress and finished goods, because there was 3 different types of stock. We've dealt with the raw materials, so we now need to move on to the work in progress. And this type of stock is the stock which is part completed. So what I want you to do is think about if you went on the bus in the morning with 8 bars of chocolate, and you sat on the bus all day, and you went round Birmingham city centre all day, and you ate the chocolate, you ate 3 bars of chocolate, you would then be left with 5. You started off with 8 in the morning, you ate 3, and you were left with 5. So what we would say is the cost of that chocolate was 3 bars. You used up 3 bars. So the cost to get from what you were in the morning to what you were at the end of the day was 3 bars of chocolate. 8 bars in the morning to 5 bars in the afternoon. And that works out the cost of the chocolate that you used up. Well, we can apply this principle to work in progress. So if we have our manufacturing cost, which is what we had before, what we will do now is add in, underneath the manufacturing cost, we will add our opening work in progress, and we will take away our closing work in progress. And just like the chocolate, we started with 8 bars, we finished with 5, so it tells us the cost of the chocolate was 3 bars. And this is the same principle. The cost of the work in progress is add your opening work in progress minus your closing work in progress, and that will give us what we call the cost of goods manufactured. So after our manufacturing cost, I don't know whether we need it all now, but after our manufacturing cost, we're going to add in our opening stock of opening stock of work in progress, and we're going to take away our closing stock of work in progress, and that will give us the cost of the goods manufactured. So first of all, we work out the manufacturing cost, and then we deal with the work in progress, add the opening work in progress less the closing work in progress, and we get the cost of goods manufactured. The only other item that we have to deal with is the closing stocks. And we do exactly the same with the closing stocks of finished goods and opening stock of finished goods as we did with the work in progress stocks. So after the cost of goods manufactured, we will add in opening stock of finished goods. So the cost of goods manufactured, add in your opening stock of finished goods. You then take away your closing stock of finished goods, and that will equal your cost of goods sold. So after the first section, which deals with the manufacturing cost, the direct cost and the indirect cost of the factory, we then deal with the work in progress. We add our opening stock of work in progress minus our closing stock of work in progress. That gives us the cost of goods manufactured. We then take our final stock, which are the finished goods, and we add in our opening stock of finished goods. We take away our closing stock of finished goods, and this will then give us the cost of goods sold. This is what it actually costs me to make the sales. If my cost of goods sold was 100,000 and my sales were 130,000, I would be able to say, well, I made sales of 130,000, but it cost me 100,000, the cost of the goods sold, to actually make those sales, so my profit would be 30,000. Have a look at the examples which are below. There is a layout of a manufacturing account, and there are some question practice there for you to have a go at. So please have a go. Try your best. You can email it to me. You may well be able to submit it on the Google Classroom. However you choose to do it doesn't matter. I will get to it, and I will get back to you. So I hope this manufacturing account was useful. If there are any other topics that you want me to cover, please let me know. We have already done some on costs and cost behaviour. So now we have manufacturing. I will attempt to do stock, and I will attempt to do budgets. Okay, so thank you very much, and take care and try the questions and get back to me with any problems. Thank you.